What's up, everyone? Welcome back. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, where the state of our industry is growing up. So let's get right to what everyone is talking about. You know, for years we've talked about speed, how quickly you can find a buyer, get an offer, close a deal, or react to the next headline. But a more mature market demands something different. It demands strategy over speed. And that means understanding that today's buyer may not be looking at real estate the way yesterday's buyer did. They're asking better questions. They're thinking longer term. They're looking beyond the apartment itself and considering lifestyle, value, flexibility, and what a property means for the next chapter of their lives. We're also seeing that mindset reflected on the selling side. They are downsizers who aren't simply looking for something smaller. They're trying to right-size their lives, and then there are legacy sellers who may have owned a property for decades, carrying not just an asset, but memories, history, and sometimes an entire family story. So perhaps the real evolution in our market just isn't about prices, inventory, or interest rates. Perhaps it's about how people are making decisions. The market is growing up, and when it does, the professionals who succeed may not be the ones who move the fastest. They may be the ones who understand the moment, ask better questions, and have the strategy to guide their clients through it all. And here on set with me today is Jared Antin from Brown Harris Stevens, and a first-time guest for us here, Andreas Perea-Garzon from Brown Harris Stevens as well. And they join me now to discuss, but first, let me welcome my listeners and my viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate, so let's get behind the headlines and inside the state of our industry.
Preparation is what turns a complex move into a seamless one. At Roadway, white glove moving isn't defined by speed, it's defined by control. Every successful move follows what we call the Roadway method: structured pre-planning, building coordination, insurance, compliance, and clear accountability handled before move day begins. Supported by a national fleet, integrated storage, and VIP level protocols, Roadway is built to manage complex high-value moves. Roadway Moving and Storage, trusted by agents to protect the client experience.
Okay, everybody, we are back, and we're going to talk today about how the market has changed. I call it the market is growing up. What do I mean by that? Well, things are different. Buyers have a different perspective, different outlook. Sellers have a different perspective, different outlook. As a result, we as real estate agents have to also have or match that kind of different perspective if we want to be successful in working with our customers, our clients, and our customers. So, Jared, I want to start with you because you and I talked about this a little offline a couple of weeks ago. Let's start with the idea that the market is growing up, as I just said. What does that actually mean to you? And what are you seeing today that feels different from the way the market operated 5 or 10 years ago? What are your agents telling you that kind of sound different from what they may have told you 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah, so in many ways, from a real estate professional standpoint, this business may be getting harder. From a buyer and seller, we're dealing with different motivations that are taking hold. And I think we're coming out of a market that hasn't seen any material price appreciation in about 12 years. So I think we're seeing a new cycle starting to form in this business and in the market locally, where I think we're back to about where we were late 2010, early 2011. We're starting to see the market firm up. We're seeing a decline in supply. We're seeing stable demand, arguably high demand, especially if you take out the abnormal 2021 year. And we're starting to see,
that was abnormal.
Yeah, we're starting to see discounts firm up, negotiability reduce, and we're starting to see the first signs of some price appreciation. It's gone up a few points in the last year. We've seen 2 years in a row of starting to move that climb, and we're now pushing above the previous peak in 2016. So from a stability perspective, things are in a really good place, and I think we're setting the stage for the next move higher in prices. And this is a new phenomenon that we haven't experienced in a little while. Now, I don't think we're going to see prices run away to the rampant sort of appreciation that we saw in 14 and 15 when they're going up 20% a year, but we're going to see some price appreciation. From an agent perspective, we're also seeing this flight to quality, where the top agents are doing more and more of the business. And I know we're going to dive into this a little bit more later. And as the lead generation game has changed, this business has become back to being so much more referrals. It has become harder for a new or mid-career agent to get business, which is creating some changes. And we're in this environment for buyers and sellers where they're largely transacting based upon life needs. Prices aren't yet appreciating to a point where there's FOMO, right? The price are going to run away from them, and they're buying because something is changing in their life. So for each different person that is interacting with the market today, there's something unique or different happening now.
I agree with you, but for the naysayer or the skeptic out there who says, prices are already high, we don't need to go back to 2014, 2015, you indicate that we may be building a little stronger to get us to that point. What does the naysayer say, and what does the skeptic say about, price improvements or higher prices when we've kind of settled into a mindset of like, well, buyers are kind of sleeping because interest rates have been high. Overall carrying costs, as we've talked about before on the show, have been high. Are they really going to accept the fact that we may be growing to higher prices?
Well, I think we need to dispel the myth that buyers have been quiet. I mean, buyers fundamentally have been as active as they've been in the last decade. Again, taking out the 2021 post-pandemic, we tied this July for the second busiest July in terms of contract activity, again, behind only 2021.
Correct.
So we're seeing low supply. We're seeing high demand. We need to dispel that myth. I wrote about in one of my updates a few weeks ago, there's been an increase in population coming back to the city. About 3/4 of the population that Manhattan lost during the pandemic has returned. There is a continued dearth of supply and under, Rebney just released their Q2 pipeline. There is so few new units planned in Manhattan, in particular, in the city as a whole, and it's only getting to a small percentage of the 700,000, units that are needed to be able to match what's happening from people. So the fundamentals are there where I don't think someone can make an argument that Manhattan is overvalued. And quite frankly, many other markets in the country have experienced some incredible price appreciation over the last 5 to 7 years that in some way makes Manhattan look, quote unquote, cheap. By some comparisons. And carrying costs have gone up, holistically across the country. And I don't believe they've gone up any more in New York than they have in other areas, especially, Florida, which has gotten crushed from, a huge hike in insurance premiums.
Well, Florida deserves it. I'm not a Florida fan. So sorry. Andres, so we've always celebrated, speed in our industry, in real estate. Quick offers, quick decisions, quick closings, bing, bang, boom. Everything is, rush, rush, rush. Why do you think strategy is becoming more important now than speed? I mean, based on what Jared is saying, how people are starting to, really look differently at our market. Why are we now thinking as real estate agents and probably even buyers and sellers that, our strategy should be a little stronger than the speed at which we conclude, a transaction? Why are people starting to think that? I mean, I alluded to a little bit of it in the opening, but what's your thought on that?
I think whenever we see an offer as a buyer or seller where speed is the main point, I think there has to be a little bit of caution, a little bit of buyer, seller, beware.
Yeah.
And I think the key word is intent. What is the intention? What is the reason why speed is so important for one side of the transaction? For a buyer, they're trying to close a transaction quickly because they need to achieve something. They need to relocate. There's a certain reason behind it. And for the seller, you also have to go back and advise, okay, they want to move very quickly. We're kind of being cornered to make a decision right now, but what is the reasoning behind it? Is it they want to get a good deal, or is it that there's something going on in their life that is the bigger reason here? So I think intention is very important in the conversation.
I think intention definitely is, and based on what you just said, buyers are becoming more deliberate in their thinking and therefore then in their choices or, wherever they're making moves. So what kinds of questions, for example, might they be asking today based on being more deliberate, based on, thinking differently about how I should go out and buy something? What kind of questions are they asking agents today that maybe they never asked before?
I think a lot of lifestyle questions. I think just because you could afford something you could buy, it doesn't mean that it's the right fit for you. I have this conversation all the time. And one thing that we have to look at our market, as Jared said, there is appreciation in our market.
Yeah.
There is a demand. People want to be in New York. And there's also a tremendous amount of new wealth right now that we are seeing in our city and in the market. And just because you could afford it doesn't mean that it's the right fit for you. I had a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago on 57th Street, and they were saying to me, well, I don't know if this street fits my lifestyle. If I could get up in the morning, walk out right into 57th and 6th Avenue, is this the right fit for me?
Well, for years, part of that strip of 57th Street was called Billionaires Row.
Right.
And I used to say the same thing. Do I want to walk out on 57th Street if I own a $500 million apartment? I mean, whatever. No. So I get it.
It's something very personal, and it goes back to lifestyle, whether or not it suits them. And this isn't their only property. This is one of many. So I think buying a property in New York, first of all, you really want to have to be here. You really want to be in New York. You believe in New York. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
How much, Jared, has the definition of value, based on what he just said, the definition of value has changed for today's buyer. I remember, it was really all about price. Can I get a good price? Can I get a discount? What about this? What about that? Value to them was only about price. Now we're talking a little bit about lifestyle. We're talking about a whole bunch of different things. How do you see or hearing that value for buyers, not sellers yet, has changed?
Well, I think you have to look at the type of inventory that's being built too. So if we focus on new development for a second, compared to 20 years ago, we're building a completely different type of property, right? 20 years ago, we built incredibly large buildings from unit count, several hundred, lots of amenities, and there was a lot of studios, 1s and 2s. There were actually very few 3 or 4 bedrooms. The only way you were really able to get that is if you combined it. So arguably at that point in time, real estate was a lot more commoditized. It was a lot more cookie cutter, and it was a lot more set up around investors and some element of speculation. But over the last 5-7 years, development here has been focused a lot more on the end user, local, people who are here using this as, a full-time property or pied-à-terre, and less around speculative investment, right? So we are seeing larger properties that are forming. Part of that too is just from a economics in terms of being able to build and as a developer make the most profit you can. Building larger units results in less of a loss factor. You're building one kitchen instead of multiple kitchens across, cut up apartments. So there's profitability in it too for the developers. But the point is that we're seeing a shifting sort of inventory pool, which is also resulting in different buyer tastes. There still remains this, new versus co-op sort of environment going on. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is that buyers have access to more information than they've ever had before. So the decisions that they're making are more calculated. They're buying into a market where they're able to clearly see how properties have traded. And they're buying at a time where properties have been, roughly flat for 10 years. And many of them are going to be able to buy less than the person they're buying from bought it for. And on top of all of that, because buyers are so keenly aware on price, on value, and because they're buying based upon their life needs and they're not buying out of that FOMO, they are carefully calculated with a clear set of requirements that they want. And they're willing to jump on the property that checks those boxes, and they're willing to move, as Andre said, with expediency when a property like that comes up. But they're not willing to chase a property or chase the market. They're not willing to go after a property that they deem to be overpriced, even if they may be able to make a bid, even if that seller is willing to ultimately come down. They're not willing to take that first bite, and they're certainly not willing to compromise on that set of criteria. So they're holding firm to that, and that makes our job as agents in some way easier, and in some ways a little bit more complex. But they're telling us clear as day what they want, and then now we need to go and search for it in an environment that is lacking inventory. We need to go and try to find or create that inventory for them.
I mean, we've talked for years about, price per square foot. as I said before, value, all of these things that went into the equation, the right price versus, the wrong price, whatever. Today, as you both have been talking about, buyers becoming a little more deliberate. They're becoming a little more defined in what they're looking for. So I know it's not necessarily about square footage anymore or price per square foot. Carrying costs were an issue. People are kind of getting used to that. But in your opinion, are buyers more willing to walk away from a property that doesn't fit their larger lifestyle, as you mentioned before, even if they can afford it? The price of an apartment, the size of an apartment doesn't necessarily mean, right, it fits your lifestyle. So buyers willing to walk away from that now more than they ever were before? I remember the days when size was this and price per square foot was that, and they just bought because, trophy apartments, whatever you wanted to call them. Today, people are possibly walking away if it doesn't really fit their lifestyle. And we'll talk a little bit after the break what that lifestyle is.
Absolutely. I think going back to what Jared said, there isn't that sense of FOMO. People are not buying due to FOMO.
Right.
What we saw in 2014, 2015, everyone wanted to be in the hottest building, or one up every other apartment that your friend had or your cousin had bought. That to me is gone. I think buyers are a little bit more calculated, a little bit more even keeled in how they make decisions. And I'm now seeing that there is a list. There is a laundry list of needs and demands. And if that list is not fulfilled, they're very happy to walk away because, again, this is not their primary residence. They have other residences out there, even within the city, that suit their needs.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely, to answer your question.
But what about those who are making a purchase their primary residence, right? I mean, they're starting to think the same thing. I mean, the trend on this program the last several episodes have been the younger, more financially successful buyer is out there buying apartments today, again, based on what we're talking about today, lifestyle versus anything else. So is it a younger bunch of people buying or looking for these primary residents or even pied-à-terres? And how is lifestyle, again, we'll talk about lifestyle after the break, but how is lifestyle really affecting what they're thinking about?
So interestingly enough, in terms of demographic and age group, a lot of the needs that you would think an older demographic would look for are the same needs that our younger demographic are looking for now, which is accessibility to the lifestyle that they want, including shops, restaurants, shows. They want to have a very nuclear neighborhood where everything is at their fingertips. And sometimes you have to have that conversation that may not exist because the neighborhood that you're looking for...
I love that conversation. It doesn't exist. And they look at you like, what?
The housing stock that you're looking for, you might be looking for a certain housing stock in a neighborhood that is not fit or built that way. So you can't have, a skyscraper in the middle of Soho, right? That's just not...
Ideally.
Right.
We never know. All right, listen, we got to take a quick break. No one's going anywhere. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Affinity. Guaranteed Rate Affinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
From residential and commercial closings to litigation, Romer DeBoss is your full-service real estate law firm. We blend big firm knowledge with boutique-level attention, delivering outcomes that exceed every expectation. Contact us at romerdeboss.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. Jared, let me ask you, so when we talk about buyers, okay, sellers, whatever, let's focus a little bit on downsizers, okay? So that would be a seller wanting to downsize. What are you hearing from people who are already or who are ready to leave their larger home that they may have owned for decades, and for all whatever reasons they bought it, many years ago, children, families, whatever. Is downsizing really about space, or is it about entering a different stage of life?
I think
based on what we've been talking about, right?
in the general sense, it's about being able to right size sort of your expenses for the stage in life you are or the amount of space that you need, right? The conventional sort of process would be, you had a larger property while you had kids at home or raising family, and as they grew up and got their own homes, you needed less space, and it just made sense to be able to downsize. I don't know that we're seeing as much downsizing occur now, and if you look at the suburbs, for instance,
Yeah, I
it
agree with
really
that.
isn't
I'm not seeing a
happening
lot of
much.
that. Yeah.
And I don't know that we're seeing a ton of it in the city either. I think for part of it, it's because the moving process can be painful, right? Getting to the board process can be painful. And depending on how they've recently financed and what rate they have, it may be more expensive for them to sell and take on, new financing at today's rates than it is to just keep it. We have certainly seen a lot more of the estate sales, whether they've passed or, the resident has moved into more of an assisted living type of a situation. But I don't know that we're seeing the conventional downsizing the same frequency that we've seen before. And that's part of the reason that inventory is where it is.
When you do help somebody who's thinking about downsizing, okay, and I just did a very lovely deal on a 3-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. She sold a house in New Jersey, downsizing. It must have been a huge house to a 3-bedroom, which she considered smaller than her home, but very successfully. But I agree with Jared. I'm not really seeing in my world, my orbit, more than just that one at the moment. Who knows? I don't know that there's a lot of downsizing going on, but. How do you help a downsizing client when they come to you separate the emotional attachment they have to that property? Because you may say, I want to downsize. I don't need this large space. But yet, how is it going to really fit the next purchase, fit into my new lifestyle? That I've been hearing a lot about. And that's what my client Becky said to me. I'm ready. Got to be done. Kids are off to college. We need a smaller place. Done. My new lifestyle, she kept saying before the show. So, when you hear this from a client, I mean, I just jumped at it and said, okay, let's do what we need to do. And then one day we found an apartment. I mean, shocking as that is. But what kind of conversation are you having when somebody says to you, I would like to do this or I want to do this?
I think the first thing that we do is not separate the emotionality between their past property and where they are now. I think
that's hard to do.
I think it's hard to do, but I think by separating that emotionality, it could feel a little bit condescending when they already have a lot of emotions going on and a lot of thoughts, because even every circumstance is a little bit different. And that property might have meant things that didn't happen, right? So I think, first of all, you don't separate that. You listen very intentfully, and you take what you need out of the conversation. I think the goal is, how do we get you to where you want to be in life? And how could this move be more practical for you at this stage?
I often wonder, and again, this is just my head wondering, do people really know where they are in life at the moment, or even where they want to be? I mean, there are always going to be some that absolutely, definitely yes, because that's how they're programmed, whatever. If someone asked me, where are you in your life right now? I'd be like, I don't know. Where do you want to go tomorrow? Beats the hell out of me, right? Because I'm not focusing on it. I'm not thinking about it. It's not as important right now. But if you're selling something, I would hope that they put this all in perspective, or they have a general sense of where they want to go and for what reason. And again, I use my recent client. She knew exactly what she wanted, had a game plan for her, explained it to me. Off we went running, one day, done. Because she knew exactly what her new plan and life was about. I don't know that exists often.
Well, I think you're describing the difference between a consumer that wants to transact with intent and someone that is, happy where they are. You're not a seller today, right? No. You're not looking to leave your property. So until you have a clear sense that there's something missing, right, you're not going to take the movement. And as we've talked about so many times, and you look at the spread between someone's current interest rate and what's available in the market, the pain, right, quote unquote pain that they need to endure before they're willing to take action if the current place is a mismatch is pretty high right now, you know, especially if they're sitting on, you know, a sub 3% interest rate. If, you know, when that balance
I have a lot of
is
sellers
not
in
as
that
high,
situation.
you know, if it's a point difference, right, for argument's sake, then people will be willing to take that step because they don't feel like they're giving up something.
Based on what you just said, though, we can talk about legacy sellers, people who may have owned their home for 20, 30, 40 years, right? How different is that conversation then from a traditional seller conversation when all the points you just brought out are correct? What do you say to these people who, I got to sell? You know, I own my home for 40 years. It's way too big or it's way too old or whatever the reason is. But they need to know something.
With those conversations, the number one thing that there becomes any sort of contention is around price and the implied value of the condition of their home, right? Because in many cases, again, gross generalization, but in many cases, people that have owned their home for that long, the properties are coming to market in need of a fair amount of renovation. And obviously, you know, if you've done renovation yourself, I've done a fair amount to my house. We hold the pain and the decisions and the choices, you know, in high regard. And, you know, no one cares what you paid for that tile. No one cares what you paid, you know, for that piece of marble or that finish. There is a depreciation.
Or how many weeks you struggle with trying to get the job done.
Correct. So
we've all been there.
There's a general depreciation that comes in, you know, with real estate in general. Because again, the only reason that real estate as an asset class appreciates is because the land on which the property sits appreciates, right? Land is the single asset that does appreciate because it's the scarcity principle. The physical structure that sits on top of the land depreciates like any other asset, like a car or whatnot. And Urban Digs released a great chart, which I have starred on my phone and I will show to anyone when this conversation comes up. But you will only get dollar for dollar or slightly more than dollar for like the first minute, right? It's like before you drive that car off the lot. But you get like the first 1 to 3 years of a renovation where to truly quote unquote mint. After that 2 to 3 year mark, you start getting obviously less than $1. After about 10 to 12 years, you're not even getting back, you know, break even. There is now a negative depreciation on that renovation, and that just accelerates over time. And this is exacerbated now, again, because buyers have a general, you know, preference not to renovate because buildings have made it a little bit harder because it's certainly gotten more expensive to do the work, and finding good quality, you know, labor is harder. Now, here at BHS, we have some great brand partners and we know some great people, so we can certainly help you with that. But in general, people generally prefer to buy something that is turnkey. And the conversation with many sellers is, look, if you make these changes, if you make these renovations, if you clean it up this way, you'll get a lot more money for it, but they don't necessarily want to go through that. So again, pricing becomes this all else equalizer. And the properties that are in need of renovation arguably can be a really good value today. If the buyer is coming in and, you know, wants to be able to take on that project, they can, in many cases, negotiate a pretty good value for themselves.
When you talk, you're a fairly successful agent here at Brown Harris Stevens. When you and your career before, when you talk to sellers today, okay, do you consider them more legacy seller? Do you consider them a downsize seller? Do you consider them just somebody who wants to make a change based on lifestyle? Because I've seen some of that. What is the I guess biggest seller type that you're dealing with lately, the last year or so?
I mean, seller-wise, I would say a combination of legacy and lifestyle, which go hand in hand. And I also think in approaching a lot of these legacy sellers, they bought a property 20, 30, 40 years ago because it served a purpose, not because they thought that it would appreciate in value and they can make a quick buck. So I think the way that I approach it is, where do you need to be in order for you to move on from this property? And a lot of these properties do need a fair amount of work, and they're not willing to do that amount of work because It takes time.
Yeah.
And but it's not all about dollars and cents.
And we all remember the time when buyers, at least buyers I used to work with, would love a project. They wanted a project. They wanted to make it their own, right?
Right.
Not so much today. For all the reasons you both, have mentioned.
Right. I think the moment when you sit down and you tell them, well, you bought this in 1997 for, $700,000 and now you want $6 million for it. I mean, that's, and we've all had these crazy conversations, but the second that they feel that you're, bringing that up and counting their dollars and cents, the conversation doesn't always go the way that you want it to go.
Listen, I bought a co-op, a one-bedroom co-op on the Upper East Side in 1997 and paid $220,000 for it. And I'm not even going to tell you what those one-bedroom units in that bing and bing, beautiful pre-war building go for today. So we've all got those stories. But we talked about buyers being more strategic and buyers, thinking about more than they ever thought about before, value, whatever. Are sellers becoming just as strategic in your mind, you think, or pretty much equal?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, I think kind of the elephant in the room with this entire conversation is that buyers and sellers have a tremendous amount of tools that they didn't have before because they have AI. But of course, AI is what it is. It's trained to be biased and agree with us. So, I think what I do is let me interpret the information for you. Let me give you my opinion. And here's the data, and you do what you wish with it.
Right.
But everyone is very strategic. All the buyers and sellers, they have the best ideas in the world because they have a machine telling them what they should be doing.
Well, this is true. You mentioned before, Jared, where, buyers have a lot more access to information today than they ever did before. In your opinion, is it more helpful or useful to the buyer or to the seller? Because we know sellers are looking too. When we go and pitch an exclusive and we're giving them a price and we're telling them based on the comps and based on whatever, and I know some of my sellers are going to check to see if I'm giving them the right number because, of course, everybody wants $100,000 more than the last sale in the building because, after all, my apartment's mint. It's beautiful. It's whatever. What is your opinion on that?
I don't think it's inherently more beneficial to one or the other. I think the reality is buyers may be more happy with the information they're going to glean off of AI from a price history than sellers because it's going to tell the seller that your property, depending on when you bought it, you may be underwater. I think the other very interesting phenomenon in our market, right, is that obviously we have 65% cash, right? So financing as a whole makes up a small subset. And then the average amount of financing is arguably pretty low. It is certainly less than 80%, and I don't know the number, but when you look nationally, obviously there's a much higher percentage of homes that are financed. And in much of the country, people are able to take FHA loans more easily than they are in Manhattan and put down as little as 3.5%. So what this creates is, a owner elsewhere who has very little skin in the game, very little equity in the property, right? And if prices move, i.e. downwards, they don't really lose anything by just giving it to the bank and walking away. But here in the city, because, generally speaking, if you're financing, you have to put down at least 20% in the majority of the buildings in Manhattan, people have a lot more skin in the game. So if a seller's not going to get the price that they want, they're not going to sell and meet the market lower. They're just going to come off market. And because of how strong the rental market is, if the building allows subletting, at least for a couple of years, it's given sellers another way, or would-be sellers another way to liquidate or get some money without actually taking the loss. So that is part of the reason that we have such low supply today is if sellers are feeling that they're not able to get the price that they want, they're just going to take it off the market. And that's why, or one reason why I always say that our market operates like a blue chip stock. Not like a tech stock that rises or falls quickly, but something that is a steady Eddie. Because we have this other balance that, again, if the sellers are going to ink a loss, they're just not going to sell. And that puts this price floor in play. So that information is very useful for sellers to understand. And then, of course, you have co-op boards that, will potentially block a sale if it's not at a certain number. And in worst cases, try to mandate that a sale is at some higher inflated number, which I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But that could be a good episode in and of itself for you,
exactly.
Vince. But so information is important, but to dive in, because there can still be market manipulation, because one of the major firms in this business is now hiding inventory, it is arguably more important to be working with a competent professional that can tell you the stories behind those properties. Did something trade higher because was there a post-closing credit? Is there more inventory than you actually think as a consumer out there? So it's unfortunate that real estate agents to some extent are needing to be forced to be back to being the gatekeepers of information, because information should be free and available. And our value should be helping you to make sense of it, to be distilling the noise. And, my whole vision behind how I show up and as a leader in this industry is about creating clarity, right? And helping to create better decision-making for consumers, for real estate professionals, to be able to make sense of everything's going on. And that's the guiding force behind how I write my, market updates and things like that. So that is where it's really important. And that information is not going to be readily available in AI for a consumer. They still need a professional that can understand the quality, that can understand the nuance, that can understand the stories behind the sales to help make sense of it.
Yeah, and I've said that you're absolutely correct. And I've said that for years about Street Easy. You can't just take Street Easy for what you're seeing or what you're looking at or whatever. You need, the human interaction here called agents, or managers to say, hey, let me explain to you what this really is. We talked a lot about lifestyle, a little bit about lifestyle. And you mentioned before, it's about neighborhood, it's about what people like to do. But people are starting to really think about how they want to live their life, where they want to live their life, and what they like to do. We did a show, I don't remember if you were on, Jared, or not, but we did a show a while ago that was like something to do with, a 5-block radius. Everybody wants us to live in a 5-block radius so they can go and do and gym and whatever within walking distance. So when we talk about lifestyle, right, is this what you're hearing from buyers who are out there saying, I want to live here for this reason, or I don't want to live there for this reason? 57th Street, you walk out, it's a busy boulevard, it's cuckoo, it's crazy, whatever. When people are explaining to you what their lifestyle is or what they want it to be, what is it? What are they telling you? Is it the gym? Is it walking to the train? Is it whatever?
I think the one thing that all of those, points that you brought forward, being close to the gym, being close to the train, being close to museums, is just practicality and ease. That's what they want. One interesting, I found this to be very interesting. I have never really discussed this with a buyer before. In terms of lifestyle and in terms of a building, we're so used to all of these new developments being centered around lifestyle, having 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 square feet of amenities. But one point that I was surprised is I have buyers asking, what is the unit mix in this building? I was like, well, that's a great question. I would never think how unit mix would play into the lifestyle of a building.
But what are they really asking? We have to be careful, not here, but when we're as agents, we fair housing, what are they really asking when they say, what is the unit mix here?
Right.
Are there families? Are there children? Are they larger apartments? Are there smaller apartments? Are there single people? On and on and on and on, right? We can't answer those questions when we're live with our customers because of fair housing stuff. And I teach it, believe me, so it's always right here. But here we can talk about it. But is that what they're getting at when they ask, what is the unit mix in a building?
No, that would be a really smart way to kind of get around and try to find out.
Well, I mean, that's the first thing that jumped in my mind, right?
It's not about that. It's about how long will the elevator take to get up to my floor? How quickly can I get in and out of the building? Could I get in and out of the building? Is there a side door? Is there this door? Is there that?
I once lived on the 24th floor in a building on the east side, and it was excruciating with the elevator up and down. Every floor in the morning, every floor at night going home. I'm like, whatever.
And some of these buildings, I mean, there's a concentration of one-bedrooms and studios. You mentioned earlier, I think with new developments before, in a way they were almost built like rental buildings because that was kind of the mindset. Right. Now we're seeing there's a trend more towards 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, full floors, or even those buildings that are new developments that have residual inventory, people looking to combine apartments. Yep. And when you have the majority of your building taking place of studios and 1 bedrooms at the base of the building, you're on the 30th, 40th, 50th floor, that does factor in
Sure.
how quickly you could get in and out of the building,
Of course.
and how the team, the concierge, the staff in the building will attend to you. And that is what they were leaning towards by asking that question. And it's something that I didn't necessarily think about before.
I did not either, and that's pretty interesting. I jumped right to who lives in the building, right? Because that's what I hear all the time.
Right.
Go
What's very interesting. So, for your listeners that are not as familiar with New York City, right? So you would equate a building to a subdivision, right, in the rest of the country. And what's interesting is if you were looking to buy a home anywhere else and you were looking at, 5 different HOAs or 5 different subdivisions, you can go on Google Maps and you can see what all the houses, you can see how spread out they are, you can see how big they are, you can drive through it. But there really is no visibility when you're looking at the building unless you're using other tools like the stack and chart on Market Proof or things like that. But you don't have that same sort of visibility as a consumer, right? You look at Google Maps, you're just going to see a tall, skinny, building. You have no ability to do that.
That's it.
That X-ray. So it is a lot different where you don't have that same visibility. And I think it's also, important that adage of, you don't want to buy the most expensive home on the block because there is a certain upper bound of how much a home will be valued based upon those in its keeping, right?
Absolutely.
The least expensive or a less expensive home on a block, on a really nice block, is going to be worth more than if that same house was the nicest home on a different block, right? So that same premise certainly holds true in our market within the buildings of understanding if you are buying, a 2-bedroom, for instance, but you're in a really nice building of 3s and 4s, that's going to be more valuable than buying that same unit in a building with a unit mix of studios 1s and 2s, where that may be one of the more preeminent sort of units. So there's certainly, a corresponding value there.
100%. All right, one more break. We're coming up right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, I'm Dylan Pachulik, CEO of XL Real Property Management, New York's most trusted name in luxury property management since 2012. We specialize in managing individual apartments, townhouses, and rental buildings held by absentee owners. We maintain our properties with the highest standards of quality and service so that owners can choose a hassle-free approach to real estate investing. Rented or owner-occupied, we handle it all. For more information, contact us at xl-rpm.com.
I'm Mark Lawrence, a founding partner of Worldwide Land Transfer. As a former real estate agent and attorney, I understand this business from every angle. We specialize in the complex transactions that define the luxury market: trust, LLCs, estates, and inherited properties. For more information, contact me directly at 917-204-5363.
General question. So we talk about buyers, we're talking about sellers, we're talking about a lot of things, and we as real estate professionals, are there to guide them through the process. What is the more mature, what does this more mature market now require from the real estate professionals that we are? Asking different questions, asking us to explain things differently, et cetera, as you both have talked about, in this hour. But what really specifically does this now changing market require us as individuals to know better or to know more of so we can address, the questions? I mean, look, not for anything. I'm a real estate agent, so no offense, but sometimes, I am. Sometimes we run around and, it's whatever, speed, quickly, do this quick. Do we ever sit back and really think about the marketplace that we're in, or as you expertly explained in the beginning, how it's changing and why it's changing? What are we expected to do now as professionals in real estate?
I think we have to
help our clients.
I think as real estate agents and real estate professionals, we really have to reflect and come to the realization that we are there as strategic advisors. That is our job to be able to not only give data, but interpret the data, give context, give the story behind why this sold for X, Y, and Z, like Jared mentioned, this co-op versus this versus that. That's our value add. Between that and our relationships, I think since information is very readily available now, it's having the ability to carefully and clearly interpret that information and tell them, this is what I think you should do, and this is what I think you shouldn't do. And if you need X, Y, and Z, I have the right person to assist you in order for you to facilitate your decision. So it's strategy, and that's why we're there.
Jared, you mentioned before about best agents, whatever. Do you think today they're becoming more strategic advisors, as Andres just said, or are they just kind of going through the typical normal motions that they normally would? Are there better agents out there bringing in a lot of business? Are they kind of changing strategically to meet the market demands?
Yes, and it depends. So I'll get back to that in 1 second. I want to piggyback on your other question of what Andres was talking about. So as real estate professionals, we should assume that more likely than not, our clients have asked some question of AI about their home buying or home selling journey, right?
sure.
So I would actually challenge agents to change the way that they start engaging with clients at the first part of the conversation. I remember a show I was on with you maybe a year ago, and I said, hey, the first question you need to ask your client not is what are you looking for today, but what prompted you to inquire, right? What prompted you to reach out? And I will still agree that that needs to be the first question. But I think now the second question needs to be, what have you asked AI about your search, right? Let's break that down. Let's call out the elephant in the room and let's understand what AI told them. And then let's show our value right then by being able to tell them, well, AI is correct about this and wrong about that. And, especially if they're asking, what their home is worth if they're a would-be seller. So I think moving that up in the conversation, I think with knowing that they're going to be asking AI and now addressing that and being able to show your value, because everything that we need to do as professionals is about showing how we are valuable. And if we are able to bring that up in the conversation and be able to show, hey, these are the things to be aware of. These are the things that it's going to hallucinate. These are the things that can't truly know. That's going to be important, right? To set yourself apart. So my next, that is up there now is question number 2. Back to the question you actually asked me now, though, there are certainly the more successful agents or those that have built a true following are getting more and more referrals and more businesses naturally coming their way. And AI is helping agents to do more business with less time, right? Even though there's more transactions, there's fewer agents in the business, right? Technology and the tools and the resources and being able to build larger and larger teams are helping these, namesake agents be able to handle more business in less amount of time. So we are continuing to see this flight to quality, these top agents continuing to want. And part of this is because the number one things that clients are doing is they're asking, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm selling. Who are the best agents that you recommend, right? And AI is quickly indexing that and telling it. So it's no longer that the agents are necessarily going on to Zillow or ScreenEasy and being able to figure it out. Now, of course, they still are on the buy side, but it has been very hard to generate seller leads, right? And the way that agents are now being able to generate seller leads is making sure that on AI, they're highly recommended, that they've been able to build a good following and a good voice. And AI picks us up very, very quickly, right? For instance, here at BHS, our Chief Marketing Officer, Matt, just set up a blog for me titled Market Clarity by Jared Antin. Guess what? If you Google my name now on AI, as of yesterday, it says that I write a blog with BHS called Market Clarity. So inside of a week of one coming up, it is now indexed in when you Google me as being a source of market intel. Right.
Well, with this guy, I always say before AI, there was Jared Antin. So there you go.
You got that from Sarah Rotter.
I certainly did.
But the point is that AI is so quick to pick it up. So this is part of the reason that you're seeing agents, if they have a long track record of business within specific buildings, they're going to continually getting recommended.
Of course. Absolutely. And that's predominantly how I get listings. I've been in buildings for a long time. How patient do we have to be in this new environment based on what he just said, based on all the new learning? From teaching, my teaching, I tell agents today, you have to be, most especially today, we have to learn to be much better communicators, much better negotiators, because things are different. We've had laws and rules changes, how it affects our commission, how it affects a whole bunch of things in the last year and a half. If we can't communicate better or more effectively, and certainly learn how, every time I open my mouth lately with a client, I'm negotiating. And it's typical of what we do, but I'm finding that I've got to change up my style of negotiation because it's warranted. So how patient are agents today, are you today, with all of these things that we're dealing with and all of these changes that are affecting the markets and how the market is growing up, as we talked about.
We have to listen. I think sometimes we have to
Stop
say,
talking
say
and
less
listen. That's
and
hard
listen.
for agents to do. Stop talking.
Sometimes it's less about us and more about the client. And
It's
more
never about us.
It's never about us. That's true. I think listening is incredibly important. I think listening to what is going on in our market.
Oh
I
my
think
God.
our
Perfect.
industry is being pushed to change. Change isn't always good when it's forced, but that's the reality of where we are now. I think we have to listen very intently and listen to what our buyers and sellers have to say in order for us to properly guide them and have those hard conversations.
But change sometimes is a problem for most agents, for people in general, just in life in general. Change is a little difficult to deal with or to manage or even accept. We're used to doing things a certain way. We don't really want to change it. Why do I have to? I used to do it this way all the time. But we are in a market that's growing up, that's changing, right? The mindset of the buyer, the mindset of the seller, completely different than it used to be 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And from 24 years ago when I first started in this business, I thought, wow, this is a breeze. This is so easy 24 years ago, right? There was no Street Easy. There was no AI. There was no anything other than me and you and you. You wanted to know something, you called an agent, right? Ain't that way today. So in a market that's growing, what old assumptions, here we go again, about real estate, do you think buyers, sellers, and agents really need to let go of? Based on what I just said, how things have changed, how people really don't always want to deal with that word change. What do we have to, and buyers and sellers have to, let go of, level the playing field, and move forward? Anything in particular, or everything?
I mean, I think the mindset that you always have to win. You don't always have to win.
Well, it's a good thought. I mean, nobody wants to lose.
Right.
We want to win, but we want to win the right way, right? It's not, again, about speed. It's not about a quick transaction. Certainly not about being a transactional agent. Here I go again. Relationship drives your business and your referrals in the future. What do we have to let go of, in your mind?
I think you have to let go of the assumption that just because you've done things a certain way for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, that you don't have to change, right? So the professionals that have been in this business a long time will need to adapt to changing consumer taste, changing regulation, changing environments, increased use of technology. And you just have to do it to some extent. The more that you resist, the harder it is for you, in my opinion, to be able to live into your full potential. And part of this is why we've seen an acceleration, again, starting since COVID, of people leaving the industry, right? Or looking to how do they set up their business with a succession plan where they've given themselves 2 to 5 years to be able to sort of wind down, but make sure that all the relationships that they've cultivated has a place to go. So that's, the number one thing that I would say is being aware and being okay that things are evolving and things are changing and understanding how do I reposition myself to fit in with that.
So I've said for a bunch of episodes this year, my business this year has completely flipped, fortunately, gotten very busy after 2 years of being, almost doing nothing. And unusual. And even through this summer, and Jared indicated this before, summer's been very busy. July's been cuckoo busy, which is not typical in our New York marketplace. What do you attribute all of this, I'm going to use the word newness, to? Why did the winter market, start later than it normally, or the spring market start later in the winter than normal? I started really picking up things around March, early April timeframe, January, February, whatever. What was the impetus behind the market movement after 2-3 years of dullness? I mean, people did business, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people this year are finding a lot more deals and a lot more success than they had in a long time. What inspired that?
I think
in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think New York has had a little bit of the perfect storm everyone around the world is talking about New York. What is happening with New York in terms of policy? What's happening in New York in
Global
terms of real
phenomenon,
estate?
right?
Right. And it always comes back to New York. I mean, everyone wants to be here. Everyone has an opinion about what is happening in New York politically. Everyone has an opinion what is happening to our industry.
Yeah.
How are these new laws being implemented? This year, real estate, everyone loves talking about real estate, but this year in the U.S., real estate really has taken center stage, and our city has as well. So I think there's that desire of wanting to be in New York.
And this is after a couple of years of the drama over interest rates, the drama over, lower inventory. You and I talked about inventory being the new, whatever. For many episodes, it's like, what happened? Because inventory is still low, interest rates are still where they are, but yet buyers are, yes, I agree, it's been a global phenomenon, but buyers are still out there, or seem to be out there more than they have been the past 2 years. As you said before, they're not dead, they're there, and they're making decisions. What happened?
The Knicks won the championship.
Yes. And what's her name got married yeah. Okay. So it's kind of like, all right, we got all this wonderful stuff happening in New York. Come to New York. It's a wonderful place to be. Right.
I mean, fundamentally, the spring season got started later because we had a horrible winter.
Yes.
Snow extended. But
Terrible.
macro-wise, we're in this K-shaped recovery, right? One way or another, the stock market continues to rise. It continues to set new highs as we went through the summer. So it's the haves and have-nots, and the haves are getting richer. There's a lot of money to be spent. You said this early in the show, and you're also seeing this wealth transfer, right? Where the older generation is coming to live longer, and also coming with this opinion that we want to bless our children and heirs while we're still alive, to be able to see them enjoy, the fruits of our labor. So we're seeing that wealth transfer happen now. We're seeing a large percentage of younger people that are buying multi-million-dollar properties have some gift or help from family. So those that have and want to be able to buy to obtain that desired lifestyle.
Last question. If you had to give today's New York buyer or seller one piece of advice, would it be move faster, wait longer, or simply have a better strategy? What would it be?
Come prepared.
Come prepared.
Which means having a better strategy.
Okay. And that's more helpful in their deciding where they want to be based on whatever their requirement is? Because I agree with you. I think being prepared is everything.
I think it's for all the factors and all the questions and all the reasons. You have to pick a good advisor, a good real estate agent to help you go through all of it. But I think you have to be prepared in the sense that you have to know what you want, what you think you want, and then have it all mapped out.
And you, what do you think?
I agree with him perfectly. I mean, the buyers or sellers need to know what they're looking for or what they want to accomplish. Right? Buyers need to understand what they're capable of spending. Sellers need to understand, where do they want to net out. And if either of those things are not achievable, then we need to have a conversation around what is achievable and is that good enough, or do you want to wait? And I think having the right real estate professional is incredibly important because they will help you make sense of what's going on and distilling all of that. So we are not seeing people chase the market. They know what they want, and we got to help them achieve that.
And quickly, because you manage agents here, what advice do you give agents to do exactly what you just said, to be more educated, to be in front of the transaction, not behind it, to understand? Look, there are a lot of agents out there who don't even understand the marketplace, right? So what kind of advice do you give them to be better at what we do?
Three things, and Andre said it first. Listen, right? So we need to ask better questions. We need to ask more open-ended questions. We need to understand where our clients are coming from. The agents need to have a key pulse of what's happening in the market, both globally and specifically within the micro neighborhoods where they work. And they need to be out there and previewing and seeing the inventory.
Oh, God, absolutely, yes. Okay, that's a wrap. We're coming right back with my final thoughts right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. Maybe the biggest lesson in today's market is the real estate is no longer about who moves the fastest. It's about who understands why they're moving, where they're going, and what they're trying to accomplish. For buyers, that means taking the time to understand what you truly value, not just what you can afford. For downsizers, it means recognizing that smaller doesn't necessarily mean less. Sometimes it means more freedom, more flexibility, and maybe more life. And for legacy sellers, it means understanding that letting go of a property doesn't mean letting go of its history. You can honor the past while making a thoughtful decision about the future, and perhaps that's what it means for the market to grow up. Less reacting, more thinking, less chasing, more strategy, because in a mature market, the goal isn't just to get the deal done. The goal is to get the right deal done for the right reasons at the right time. And maybe that's the real measure of success here in New York City real estate. And that's it for this episode of Talking New York Real Estate. I ask everyone to take a moment to really look inward and ask themselves, who are you at your core? What is your why, the reason you get up in the morning, and the driving force behind the choices you make? What beliefs guide you, and where do they come from? Your family, your experiences, your struggles, your triumphs. Understanding these pieces of yourself shapes how you move through the world. And once you know them, the challenge is to show up intentionally and to be memorable every single day, not through perfection or performance, but by living with authenticity, purpose, clarity, and the courage to let people see and feel the real you. Remember, your reputation arrives before you do. And you can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, or LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And Norman Vincent Peale said, shoot for the moon, everyone. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am so grateful. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table. And emotion, too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.